Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Looks like we got, almost 80 people in the chat. So happy Sunday, or whatever day it is, wherever you are. It's a rainy Sunday where we are, so we figured let's try to keep this Sunday live stream going. I think it was pretty successful last time, and I really loved hearing from you guys. There's a little bit more development to talk about with this Denver shooting, and not just maybe what we've learned that precipitated the shooting, but also more about KUSA 9 News hiring multiple guards actually without a license. And they have punted this basically to Pinkerton and another security company, but saying that they're not responsible necessarily for vetting the folks that they hire, that the company that they hire through is responsible for that. But they have done a report themselves on the fact that this was not actually the first unlicensed guard that has been with their crews throughout some of these protests over the summer for like the last 5 months. Let's look at some of the chats here and let some more people get in. Sunny Sunday in Texas. Yeah, I know. Don't tell me about it. I know Texas is always sunny like Florida where I'm from, but not here in the Pacific Northwest. Hi, everybody. Hello from Jacksonville, Florida. That's my home state, except for I'm from the Tampa Bay area. Greetings from Portland, Oregon. Nice. So you guys probably have the same weather we do right now. My friend who was visiting from Portland last time, we chatted last Sunday. She is officially back home. Let's see. A license isn't required, though, is it? Yes, it is required. We're going to talk about that. Colorado, SoCal. I want to move to. I'll tell you what, we've thought about moving a little bit further south in the Pacific Northwest so that we can drive over the border to the beaches in California, but then drive back out of California, maybe Nevada. What do you guys think about a move to Nevada? Let me know in the chat. Tampa, Aurora, Illinois, Miami, Ohio, Tennessee. All right, Colorado. It's really cool to see everybody from all over the place. Detroit, yeah, cold and wet. All right, how about we get to this? So, like I said, I'm going to look at a couple articles. I'm going to show you some of the reporting that the folks at KUSA have been doing on themselves. I think it's really interesting to look at a station reporting on its own issue. Now, as I said in the last, thank you, Raven. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the super chat. And I should stop here to say real fast, thank you to everybody who has been sending me PayPal, supporting me on Patreon, doing the super chats. Creators say this all the time. I'm sure you follow their channels and you hear people say this. It really is the make or break for somebody like me to be able to do this someday full time, because we really go direct with the people, the audiences. And so it really, it makes a big difference. It's not just like, I'm just saying thanks and I am not really sincere about it. It absolutely like supports my ability to keep doing this. So they can't thank you guys enough. New York, Vancouver Island, Gainesville. Awesome. So basically what we have seen, and I'm going to go to the web real fast. And like I said in the chat, but I'm going to say it now. Lynn, my husband, is actually going to take the hot seat in a few minutes and talk through some of the sort of bigger picture issues with human behavior. That's what he is a specialist in, advanced critical decision-making skills, that kind of stuff. And I have a few questions for him on this piece of paper, like what is standard operating procedure for good executive protection? How much would political bias of a person hired for this factor into all of it? And you're choosing somebody to do these jobs. Thank you, Digital Concepts, for your super chat. What do you do when a situation heats up? Choice of when to carry a firearm, and thoughts on the multiple unlicensed guards. So he's going to answer a lot of those questions, and then more questions that you might have. Raven says, "Get it, Lynn." Thank you, Raven. Raven, that's awesome. Well, what about me? I got to get it first. So we are going to talk about all that when he takes over. But I just want to kind of run you through what we've learned, and then we're going to move on from that. So let's take a look here. I'm going to go to my web. All right. Hang on. It says, photographers at rallies say images of shooter victim before shooting provide new context. Now, I have reached out to some of these photographers, and I have not heard back. So if I ever do, I would love to have them do an interview for the channel, and keep an eye on that. Hopefully one of them will get back to me. But I'm going to go off of this article now. Essentially, I watched the videos, okay, that they put out here, and I'm not going to show them on the channel because I just don't know if YouTube's going to be sensitive about it and kick me off. But basically what you see here is that Ben Kyle, this is another photographer in the area who captured Doloff and Keltner standing next to each other at a crosswalk, each seemingly unaware of the other, said he also had a run-in with the victim, which is Lee Keltner. I'm going to back up for a second in case you're new to this topic, which you probably aren't. But if you are, essentially what happened was on October 10th, there's sort of two rallies or dueling rallies, the Patriot Muster and then an Antifa BLM soup drive. They're just sort of dueling rallies, opposing points of view politically, ideologically, and they're in the same space. And it appeared that the events were essentially over, but there was this side conflict happening. And Matthew Doloff was an unlicensed security guard. He was acting in the role of a security guard for 9 News KUSA, which is owned by the company Tegna that I used to work for. I quit my TV news career last year. And so Doloff is there with a producer working for 9 News, and then Lee Keltner is there for the Patriot rally. Something happens, and from photographs that we've seen, Mr. Keltner sprayed something like an OC spray or bear spray. Doloff shot his gun. The timing of it all, I think they're all facts that we're still trying to learn more about. But Keltner died, and Doloff is now facing second-degree murder charges. There's a lot of talk about Doloff's political bias in social media posts, left-leaning political bias. There were tweets initially that he was a member of Antifa. We learned as far as the police saying what Doloff was there to do, they have said that he was not there for either one of the events, that he was there in the capacity that Tegna has said he was in the capacity there for, which was to provide security. However, he was breaking the law because he was not licensed to do so. So it seems, though, some of these photographers working for other outlets or independent photographers had been around these events throughout the day and had captured some interactions with Mr. Keltner. And it appears that Mr. Keltner did not want to be photographed. He made multiple comments to the crews that he did not want to be on camera. There was a pass by where actually I wrote down there was a photographer who took a video of him, was taking video of him, and you hear Keltner say, "If you take a picture of me and I'm going to light you the F up." And the photographer then responds, "I'll get it on film if you do." There were another couple exchanges that I saw where it's very obvious if you watch some of the stuff that they've posted in these videos that the photographers who were in these situations and in these particular side conflicts were trying to get video, but there were people there that did not want to be on video. And that's not uncommon in events like this, though I will say more and more it's becoming common that people are not wanting to have themselves end up on social media, for instance. We've seen, you hear cancel culture come up a lot. And so I think more and more people just don't want to be on camera. We saw actually a Minnesota reporter had his camera phone, smacked out of his hand not too long ago when he was at, I think it was a Trump rally. And I think people are more and more they see a cell phone come out and they're just like, get out of my face. And it appears that Mr. Keltner was aggravated by being on film. Now, what happened in the moments right before the shooting, I think we're still learning about, but from different camera angles, you can see that there was an argument going on the side. It appears that the producer with 9 News was filming it with his phone, and Keltner comes up and says he doesn't want to be on camera, which would go with what I saw in other videos, Mr. Keltner saying he did not want to be on video. And then boom, this is what happens. It appears that Mr. Keltner slapped Mr. Doloff, and then the spray and the gun, these things just come out literally like that within seconds, and Keltner's now dead. So real fast, I just want to talk about, my husband and I we're talking a little bit about this because a reporter, I think, is regularly going to initially think, or a producer, somebody, especially if you work in TV and video, you're just gut reaction, whether it's right or wrong, is to hear something like that. You know, there's a conflict or something, and you're like, I want to go figure out what's going on. It just becomes part of your instinct working in the business. I have definitely been the person who's, you know, like that photographer was like, I'm allowed to videos, as somebody who has had a family member struggle with addiction. There was something that they used to say in the recovery groups, and that was, you know, imagine yourself, you're walking across the street and you see that it's your turn to go. There's you know, the pedestrian sign, it says your turn to walk, right? It's your turn to walk. But there's a semi truck coming down the road, and you go, well, you know what? Screw that truck. I'm going to walk across the street because it's my turn. The light says it's my turn. And so you cross the street, and then you get hit by the semi truck, and now you're dead. Well, now you're dead right. Do you want to be dead right? And so I have been rethinking a lot of this as somebody who, I'm not currently out in the streets covering these events, but I think I would act differently now. I think I would reconsider whether, if there's an event, a conflict, there's some kind of altercation happening on the side, and someone says, I don't want to be filmed by you, or I'm going to light you up if you film me, I'm probably not going to keep filming. I'm probably going to walk away, because to me, it's just not worth it. I don't want to die. So again, maybe other journalists would disagree with me on that one. I think I've said this in my last live stream, that if you're somebody who wants to participate in events where people are getting really emotional, you know, be aware that they can turn very quickly, like this situation did. And, you know, I said the last live stream too, like, you have one guy who's maybe in jail for the rest of his life, another guy who's dead. And it's, you know, it's a tragedy all ways around. I guess it's all, you know, one other thing, that the point of the video also that I want to talk about here is Investigation 9 News has used multiple unlicensed security guards. Matthew Dolliff is not the only unlicensed guard 9 News has contracted to provide security for reporting crews covering protests and riots. And you scroll down here and they talk about how the reason that you would obviously want to be licensed is, besides the fact that you're following the law, is that there's training required in getting your license. So they say here that there are 16 hours of required training to receive a security guard license. This is for Denver. Then there are 8 hours of additional security guard training each year for a license to be renewed. And that it says here, a big part of the training those seeking a security guard license go through involves appropriate use of force. And so, like, this guy, Grant Linhart, the president of International Counterintelligence Services, one of the approved trainers for security guards seeking a license in Denver, says licensing and training requirements are important so you know your operational boundaries, otherwise you run amok. Now, scrolling down to the folks that were working for them that did not have a license, they said that they contracted through Garda World Security Services and Pinkerton. Pinkerton is the one that provided Matthew Dolliff. However, Pinkerton has said that he was a subcontractor, though they have not said who they subcontracted him from. And that Denver 9 News found that in their the protests in Denver that they were following, that they had multiple guards like Dolliff who did not have the appropriate licensing. Interestingly, one of the guys that they talked to was a former police officer somewhere in the area, I don't believe Denver, and he said that he wasn't even aware that you had to have a particular license to do executive protection in the city. But, you know, it says that basically here, like, they actually said that there was one of the licensed guards who worked with them on August 28th during a clash between protesters and Denver police, was in plain clothes, according to sources who observed him there, but he was not allowed to be per city regulation. So that's another subcategory here. You know, you may have one kind of license, but maybe you don't have a license to be in plain clothes and have a firearm. So Lynn's going to talk about that kind of stuff. This is sort of where we get to the end of my knowledge of the rules. But I will say that I find it interesting. 9 News has brought in people from other stations to cover this. Of course, they still work for the same corporation. So it's not like they're going to report something that is, you know, going to blow the top off of that company. Even if they come from another station, they still work for the same company. But I do find it interesting that they are on top of this, they are at least saying, okay, hey, by the way, this guy wasn't the only one we had with us who didn't have the appropriate licensing. We've had other people. Maybe they don't want to be reading about themselves in the Denver Post and they want to get on top of it first. I don't know. But I will say I'll give them credit for telling people that, a handful of their guards over the course of the last 5 months have not had proper licensing, just like Mr. Dollif, again, who is facing second-degree murder charges. So with that, I'm going to put Lynn in the hot seat, and I'm going to go through some of your comments while I am on the side. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
All right. Yeah, take your big glass of water there. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Nice to see all of you. Thanks for supporting Allie. Check your gain. Audio is too high. Roger that. How's that? Is that a little better? Howdy. There, Mike Shaw TV. So, Allie asked me to hop on and talk about a few things as far as from my perspective with regard to some of these things, with not just with this story, but in general, because the way I would look at these things from a case study perspective, there is gotcha, Lima Charlie. I got you licking chicken, 5x5. There we go. My thought process is you'll see repetitions in behavior, that there's a reason why there's case law for things. It affects not only us as citizens or civilians, it also obviously affects folks who, like our law enforcement, who are out there on the front lines every day for us, them as well. All this case law is there. So Ellis K, who am I? I am Allison's husband. So I guess what I will do first, for those who had the question, is like, who the heck am I and why am I even talking on here, and what qualifies me to speak about some of these things. So thanks, David Allman. So the there you go. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, thanks, honey. So I've spent just over the last 20 years working in defense, security, intelligence, counterinsurgency, so on and so forth. I started out in the Marine Corps. I was in the infantry, and I went into special operations. I was a force reconnaissance Marine and a scout sniper. I was an instructor at MOS producing schoolhouses, which is job occupation schoolhouses. So as a formal school instructor, senior instructor, and ultimately earned my master certified instructor credentials. And I was also a part of human behavior programs for the military, for Department of Defense, State Department, and as well as some other organizations. And so I've been teaching this stuff for a long time. So that's where it's coming from with regard to me and what I do and why I'm weighing in on any of this stuff. So first of all, just for perspective here, no matter what, whether you're an individual, citizen, you're in this case working as a security, privately contracted security, and or you're in law enforcement. No matter what, you are always responsible for your own behavior and the decisions that you make. So there's that. So I'll just kind of get into first thing, first question was SOPs for good executive protection. The thing to keep in mind about executive protection, and this is actually a good rule of thumb as well as for being a person, is it's threat avoidance is really what the majority is. I mean, you're at all costs going to avoid getting into some kind of physical altercation, or ultimately even, say, for example, a gunfight. So that's kind of one of the number one premises when it comes to close security protection or executive protection. On top of that is, like, I have a principle. My client, whoever that happens to be, like, that is my sole focus in the world. And you'll even see in some of the other areas where guys and gals have gone overseas and acted as static or dynamic protection details, they'll care so much about the principle where it's like everybody else in the team, hey, you're on your own. So the starting point is observation and awareness, and an informed awareness as to what are the human behaviors that I'm seeing and what are the threats that are present and how do I mitigate those threats. And one of the easiest ways to mitigate a threat is by you yourself not being there. So my dad always told me the best way to win a gunfight or a fist fight, don't get in one to begin with. So that's the first step of that. I've seen a lot where, clients who go overseas and stuff like that, and they want to have some additional security, whether it's an actual detail or security consulting, because those are two different things. Being informed as well as to the decisions that you're making. I mean, anybody could come up and say, "Oh, I'm this, I'm Billy Badass," so to speak. Well, you could be as bad as you want to think you are, but the reality is there are legalities to all of this stuff. So if you were considering hiring any kind of security detail or consultant or advisor, they should be fully prepared to answer any questions that you have with regard to regulations, licensing, and some of those requirements. The other side of that is too, any good practitioner will give you guidance as far as like, okay, well, should we, prototypically, should we find ourselves in any types of situation? This is some of the behaviors. These are some of the things that you're going to expect from us. And that's some of the big things that, like, for example, what I do, because there's a company that we work with, that we're in partnership with, that we actually provide human behavior training for them, that they use for their protection detail specialists. And so a lot of these things get discussed. So the number one rule to anything is being well trained. And going back to some of those regulations and licensing requirements, they do go from state to state. So it's different. So you'll have across the board where, nationally, for example, everybody has the inherent right to self-defense. But there's other things to consider in there too, as far as like a requirement to retreat and so on and so forth. But each state, while they can't lower those requirements, they can certainly increase requirements. So that's something to be aware of and to be considerate of. And you can have things in the same situation where it's like, well, say for example, I have a licensed guard card for a particular state, wherever I happen to be working or whatever. Well, just because I have that licensed guard card, if I'm carrying a firearm, but I'm not licensed to carry that firearm, well, you're still in the wrong. You're still in the wrong. Or like the example of, well, I have a license to carry a firearm, but you don't have a license to go into this particular setting, or an endorsement. It's really an endorsement is what in this case it was, to be plain clothes. And so that could be very problematic. Whereas, you like, the best way to look at it is, if you've ever seen that movie Crash, it's a really great movie, but there's a part in there that I really like. It's where you see two people flying at each other at 100 miles an hour, but they're talking on the wrong frequency. They're and heuristically, you're predisposing what you think versus what they think. And if those two things are different, then you come into a bad situation. So, if I'm citizen walking down the street and all of a sudden I have some guy getting in my face to tell me what I can and can't do, well, I don't see a badge. You haven't identified yourself. You haven't given me any credentials or anything to say otherwise. So, I may be inclined to like, well, who the heck are you? Why do I need to do what you're telling me to do? And there's only, ultimately, other than reason, the only other way to get an individual, a human being, to do what you want them to do is, other than reason, is violence or the threat of violence. So again, those are decisions that it's going to be up to you as an individual to make. So that's where some of that is problematic. Let's see here. I'm just kind of taking a quick look at some questions here. So one of the other questions was, how much should political bias factor into choice or choosing or not choosing a guard or security? I've been asked questions before about like, well, how do you vet somebody? A vetting process, it depends really on the application and what you're doing, but that can become very difficult. To simply put, to answer the question, your political, cultural, or religious influence doesn't really matter to me when it comes to as I'm looking at you as a total person. If I'm vetting you for any particular kind of job, well, certainly I take it into context. But you pray, you don't pray, God, Allah, Vishnu, dolphin, a lamp. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to me. Uh, so, because ultimately, your decisions, and that's the other thing when you go back to the law, especially you as an individual, as a citizen, you're responsible for your own decisions. If you're working in a guard capacity, then the company that hired you is now liable and responsible for the decisions that you make. Same thing for a law enforcement officer. When just because they're wearing a badge, they've been through the qualifications and they have the training, and that's why the oversight, the public oversight is, if an officer does something, then that agency, that city, they now become legally and civilly liable for the decisions that their individual officers make. It's the same thing in the military. You're as an individual under Uniform Code of Military Justice, you're responsible for the decisions that you make, but then also your leadership, going all the way up to the top, becomes liable as well because they put you in that position and you were working in good faith to that effort, or the expectation of good faith into that effort. So those are things to consider. I would point to the FBI did a white paper. It's probably a couple of years ago now. I forget the exact date, but they did a overall look at active killer incidents from 2000 to 2013, and there was a couple different things that came out of that were really interesting, both statistically. And I don't get too wrapped up in statistics because a lot of times 80% of all statistics are made up right there on the spot. Some of you may have got picked up on what I meant by that, and some of you may not, but that's whatever. But the big thing that was noticed was things, the FBI called it leakage, to concerning behavior. So leakage. So when I see leakage on things, particularly like social media, of where I'm injecting the use of violence, violent rhetoric, or the mentioning of weapons or deadly force or things like that's a form of coercion. I'm trying to let you know how serious I am about this, what I'm saying. So going back to one of the things that Allison said about, the protester, when he's like, hey, you put that camera in my face and I'm going to light you up. On one hand, it's like, yeah, guy could be tough talking. On the other hand, he could be deadly serious about what he's saying. You see somebody driving down the road in their vehicle and they've got a bumper sticker on their car that says protected by Glock, or from my cold dead hands. You take those things seriously. People show you and they teach you how to treat them. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're one of those individuals that sells wolf tickets, and meaning like, say I'm in there and I'm talking real tough and I say something, hey, you do this, that, or the other, I'm going to bust you up or whatever. Well, be careful, because you might run into a true believer. And what I mean by a true believer is you might run into someone who is more than willing. I use the tombstone line. I'll be your Huckleberry. That's exactly what that is. So, you might want to think twice, and you never know who or what it is that you just bumped into, and that's that's something to be considered when you're looking at that. So, in long form, to answer that question, do you consider that stuff? I don't necessarily consider it as a point of like, well, am I going to hire this person or not hire this person? But when I do see a pattern of behavior, and when I see particularly concerning behaviors or anomalous behaviors, that leads me to think that that they are violent, or have the thought of violence on their brain, then I take that very seriously. And when you're looking at professions like this, like you want somebody who's going to be cool under pressure. So that's the way I look at that. So the next question is, well, what do you do when a situation heats up? So I guess I'll take that as what do I do if I see a situation is escalating or elevating? Well, very simply, I remove myself from it. If I find myself in a position where I'm unable to remove myself, then I'm going to do everything I can do to de-escalate or mitigate that situation. I'm certainly not going to try to incite, increase the overall tones or mood of the situation. It's just not a smart thing to do. For example, I don't know if any of you ever watch or listen to Jesse Lee Peterson, but he talks a lot about anger, and anger is weakness. I was actually just on a range with the Recon Sniper Foundation out in Scottsdale area of Arizona. They were doing some shoots, and I was talking to some of those shooters, and these guys are world-class shooters, and it's particularly the 3-gun team. And we were talking about anger, and everybody has a bad day on the range, for example. But to a man, every single one of them's like, "Yep, don't go shooting angry." And there's a lot of reasons for that, but anger does cloud your judgment. It causes things as well in the cognitive brain. There's chemicals that get released, such as catecholamines. They come from the amino acid tyrosine, and those can affect your decision making as well. And in fact, enough of those chemicals can have the same effect on your executive thought center, which is your prefrontal cortex. That's where you have things like social filters and so on and so forth, but it's your executive decision-making center. That's bad when you're talking about a critical situation. And talking to those guys, I said, yeah, so if you're shooting your stages and you have a couple bad stages, and on your next stage, if you're angry about that, for example, how well do you do? And every single one of them was like, yep, you're going to shoot worse. So that's the thing. Like when you're doing things out of emotion, when you're making decisions out of emotion, you're already behind the power curve. You're putting yourself on your heels. So definitely, check your ego, check the emotion at the door, and that's just the way that needs to be. With that being said, there's another question on here. So choice of when to carry a firearm or not. So I'll start. I'll talk from a open carry, concealed carry perspective, and we'll kind of walk down the rabbit hole of this for a minute. But first thing to understand is use of force is use of force, and deadly force is deadly force, and it doesn't matter the implement I use or the weapon or the artifact or so on and so forth. What matters is the decision making that leads up to it, and what the overall intentions to begin with were for you even being there. So the same standard in which, like, say I get accosted on the street and somebody is using force on me, and so therefore I'm in fear for my life. I feel there's potential for serious bodily injury, serious bodily harm, and I understand that under the civilian legal standard, and I'm looking at ability, opportunity, and jeopardy, law enforcement is more, for them, like preclusion becomes a factor more so than it does for a civilian. But there's several things in there when it comes to the escalation of force and force continuing in there, and the biggest thing to look at is like using the least amount of force necessary. Now, in a standard cookie cutter training, you'll hear, well, use the least amount of force is necessary to reduce the threat. However, in certain instances, certain cases, you may rise above one level of force, if you need to, depending on the situation. And those are very general speaking terms, but the whole point of being able to carry a weapon is you're effectively trying to balance out the outmatch. If you're outmatched in size, strength, or disposition, that balances that. So, for example, if Allison, 105 pounds of her, is walking down the street and she's getting accosted by some man, well, the OC spray, the taser, the firearm is what helps with that overmatch and enables her to protect herself and save her own life. However, you do have a requirement as to, once you have reduced the threat to, when it gets to that certain point, that's how quickly those tables can turn to where now you've gone from the person being attacked to you've now turned into the aggressor. So it's a very conscious choice when you decide to carry a firearm somewhere. Now, there's differences for different states and different rules and different laws. But for example, when you look at things like open carry versus concealed carry, and you'll see a lot of people, and again, this is a personal opinion, but I'm very leery of, well, hey, on one hand, it may be my right. I can go out there and I can carry my long gun, my AR-15 or my pistol, and I'm in an open carry state, so I can carry it. Hey, great, more power to you. That is your Second Amendment. However, you do have to consider what type of atmosphere you're creating when you're doing that. Now, in circumstances where you've seen like those protests in like Virginia or whatever, where everybody showed up with their firearms and then everybody left, how they even cleaned up after themselves before they left. To me, I do think that's a win. However, some of that stuff is put into place more for somebody who is concealed carry. So in states where it is not an open carry law available, the potentiality for something to happen, like say, for example, I'm carrying concealed and through the course of me moving or whatever, my shirt comes up and now my firearm, you can see my firearm. Well, technically, but depending on the interpretation of that state law, they could say, well, you just brandished a firearm and now you lose your privileges to carry a concealed firearm. And that's why open carry laws are very important to people, because it protects me from losing my ability to carry if something like that were to happen. Because there is a big difference between, oh, my shirt just so happens to come up and you can see the lower receiver of my pistol, versus like I'm getting into some kind of verbal altercation with somebody and I just tap it or I lift my shirt up. Well, number one, I'm brandishing the firearm. And number two, and it goes back to that whole coercion thing, like I'm trying to tell you, like, hey, I'm taking this serious. My 40 might have something to say about that. And that's not appropriate. So when you go through like a concealed carry course and you get certified to carry your concealed carry, that's not some kind of training to make you some kind of weapon ninja. What that's actually for is to fully make you aware of the responsibility that you are now taking and the requirement by you to understand the local laws and statutes in which you carry that firearm. For example, certain states have written and codified into their statutes as to where you can and can't carry, whereas other ones leave it up to, they may leave it up to a private business or a private institution to determine, hey, is this a carry zone or not? So, the ignorance is bliss argument, the like, oh, I didn't know that dog will not hunt in court. That will not fly. That will not hold water. It is your responsibility to know and understand that. So definitely, for those of you, because I see some questions on here asking about firearms and concealed carry and stuff like that, your training doesn't just stop at that concealed carry course. I would definitely recommend looking out for other associations and like the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, things like that, because it helps you with legal advice and so on and so forth. And you can also purchase concealed carry insurance. I would highly encourage that because the fact of the matter is even if it's not with a firearm, if you use force and a person gets seriously injured or killed in the process of you using force, you can just go ahead and expect that you're not going home for a minute. You're definitely gonna have to make some sort of statement at a bare minimum. You're gonna be questioned by law enforcement, and even if you get cleared legally, criminally, you still have the civil liability of whoever the survivors are, the family, or so on and so forth. So those are just things to be considerate of when you're looking at that. But definitely, I make conscious decisions whenever I'm carrying or if I'm not carrying. So those are things that I encourage every person to think about. Let's see here. So some questions, I'll go down the firearm thing for a second. Some questions were like, hey, I'm trying to I have a wife or daughter or a friend who's interested in it, and so on and so forth. So how do I go about that? Well, first of all, when you're talking about selecting a weapon, that's a very personal thing. So, but I would recommend, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to give you advice. mostly unsolicited advice as to what you should get, what you shouldn't get. It's such a personal thing. I'd recommend you go to a range and rent several different types of weapons. And for that individual, they need to determine comfort. Definitely going through a course to learn appropriate safety etiquette and measures. Those are important things to look at on top of just the legal training that you should take. It's a very serious thing we're talking about, and you have just as much responsibility with that and are liable, like just like having a driver's license and driving a vehicle. So let's see here. I think we hit most all the points that Allie brought up. So women are better with non-automatics, in my opinion. I would argue that. The reason being is some of the best shooters that I've ever trained when it comes to actual training the use of firearms, some of the better shooters have been women. It's more of, there's a group, for example, called the Well Armed Women. I'm going to give them a plug. It's a great organization. And some of these women, I wouldn't mess with them. But, you're going to have that guy put that revolver in their hand because, they don't have to think about it. They don't have to think about loading a magazine or types of malfunctions and things like that. And while that's true, the reality is malfunctions are based on shooter error. However, if you look at the situation, first of all, most shootings are going to occur within 3 to 5 feet. Number one. Number two, you're going to have what we call probably some catecholamine toxicity, or combat cocktail is what we call it. So it's going to be affecting your decision making, but it's also going to make you very shaky and some other things. And you're going to do things where in a normal, non-stressful situation, you're on the range practicing shooting, for example, with that revolver. Most revolvers have a very heavy trigger pull compared to automatics. And then the other thing is like, well, once I've gone through those 5 or 6 rounds, now it's much more of a pain for me to reload. And when it comes to reduction of the threat, when somebody says, well, how many rounds does it take? It takes as many as it takes. That's the correct answer. It's all about what you can articulate at the back end. So going back to my original statement, I would say that it boils down to training, and it boils down to taking the time to find out what you're best at. And so that's just the way it is, as far as I'm concerned, in my humble opinion. Let's see what else we got here. Would keep in mind, even if justified, there's still liability concerns, more so if the attacker doesn't die. That's from Broken Stitch. Yeah, absolutely. They have a saying that dead men tell no tales. However, at the same token, like, well, it's it could still, depending on the outcome of it, it could still be considered murder. So one of the things I would consider when it goes to the training side, guys, this is something that was a recommendation that I happened to hear Masad Ayub, which if you don't know who that is, you can check him out. But he's a subject matter expert in the field when it comes to articulation and things like that. But he mentioned that whenever you attend some training or whatever, that all your notes, your materials, your certificates, so on and so forth, make copies of that, send that to yourself via certified mail, because one of the other things that would be hard pressed upon you as a civilian if you have to go to court or face some legal liability on that is proving, like, well, what was the information that I had at the time? Most anybody can bring in a subject matter expert or whatever and say, oh, well, scientifically this, that, or the other was going on. But if you didn't have that information at the time, or if you weren't aware of that knowledge at the time, then it's really not necessarily admissible. So that was one of the recommendations he made, again, as a safeguard in order to protect yourself. So that's just something to look at when it comes to your articulation. If any of you have any questions as far as like situational awareness and how do I use advanced critical thinking and decision making, I did, and we put the link in the bottom of this episode. I did a podcast with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carlos Vasquez, and he's a forensic psychologist. He's also a professor. He's an adjunct at Fielding Graduate University, as well as at Pepperdine University. And he has a podcast called Situational Awareness Tactics, and there's a lot of good info on there. But I did a episode with him. It was about 38 minutes, so it's not that long. But he, you know, he has a lot of good things in there. So if you're trying to get some more knowledge, there's a lot of things out there. Just be careful, you know, vet where you're getting your information from. Look at the credentials, whatever, who you're getting it from, because as we would say in the Marine Corps, there's a lot of sea lawyers. There's a lot of people out there that think they got knowledge, but they're really, you know, they're throwing darts at a board as well.
Someone asked about the Marine who disarmed the rioter in Seattle. I don't know if you know anything.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I had an opportunity to get some contact with him. I haven't been able to talk with him yet because he knows some other folks that I know. What was the question in regard to that Marine?
Was he justified in disarming the?
Oh, absolutely, he was. Yeah. So the question was that Marine that you know, he went and disarmed the individual that took that weapon. I mean, the argument that he could make is at that point in time where he was at, you know, did he feel in fear for life, and the use of force that he used in order to take that weapon system back, knowing that that the weapon system was taken from a police cruiser. It always boils down to your articulation, and then on the back end of it, you know, follow on from that. Is there a crime committed? Is somebody hurt or injured? And then finally, you know, that state, that city, what's their you know, are they gonna level charges? Do they have charges level? And that's where, you know, I think when going into discussions about like the criminal justice system and procedural justice, a lot of people don't realize like it may start with law enforcement, but ultimately there are certain things where the law enforcement officers themselves have discretion, but it really boils down to what happens when it goes to court. And so that's always going to be the thing. Hey, what can I prove? What can I say in court? That's why when people ask me questions about, well, what about what some of the things that this guy says or believes, or his political party affiliation or everything like that, like most of those things aren't gonna apply. I mean, it may call into question character. It may be, you know, as towards the individual's character, but it really boils down to what are we talking about as far as what this person did and what can I prove, and not based on what my assumptions are. So, can you play the video footage for everyone again? No, I can't at this point in time, but maybe in the future.
You can just remind me though, if the guy was a security guard for Q13 in Seattle. I don't know if he actually said that.
Yeah. Yeah, shooter was in his draw before the mace cam was even raised. This is clear photo evidence. Yeah, again, I mean, there's a lot of things you don't know what the person was seeing. It's really going to boil down to his articulation. As far as all the other things he has going against him, like that, those are going to be tough nuts for him to crack. But certainly level of force, use of force. You know, what was it that I was seeing that prompted me to decide to go to guns, go to force, and that's going to be, you know, that's going to be a tough one. And it's not always about what I think. It's more about, well, what does the law say? So, you know, all of us can opine on those things. I know for me personally, I wasn't there. I know what I've seen in the videos and the photos. I know I have my own personal opinions as to like, if it were me in that situation. First of all, I seriously doubt I would be in that situation. I go at great lengths to avoid situations like that. I know what the reality is of when you make a decision like that, and that's something that I would impress upon anybody, and especially those listening and watching this podcast, is you are always responsible for your decisions. And you know, you can have the debate as whether or not what somebody caused you to do or forced you to do, but the reality is you are the one who is making decisions, and so the things that you do, you're responsible for, no matter what.
How much is firearm insurance?
I don't know off the top of my head, but you know, the way I would look at it. Okay, thanks. One of the questions is how much is firearm insurance? Yeah, somebody just posted up on there. Ibanez Dudek. I hope I said that right, but I don't think it's that crazy expensive. You know, the thing about firearm insurance, if you're thinking about that, is what's the potential. So you know, it's cheap on the front end versus compared to on the back end. You could go through, you know, some serious cash having to deal with that stuff. One of the questions: what gun do you conceal carry? When I do carry conceal, I have a Glock 43. I've also got a SIG 238, a 239. Um, I really like those SIG. I believe they're the 357 or 365s. Yeah, SIG 365. I really think those are cool, but I've shot them, but I haven't. I don't personally have one. I wish things were as calm as they used to be for guards. Don't see me doing that job nor running that kind of company today. Yeah, I don't believe. I don't see things with things as calm as they used to be. Yeah, and you got to think about too. In a lot of these cases, especially for static security or unarmed guards, they're making what, like $12 to $15 an hour. I mean, no offense to those guys, but you get what you pay for, and it's the same thing as like you can't thrust a whole bunch of expectations upon them that are not reasonable for what's going on there. So the gun guy was grabbing for the mace first. That is why he got slapped. Old man funky, yeah. 9mm Sig P 320 is my. Oh yeah, we have a 320. Those are good firearms as well. So I'm probably going to wrap it up here pretty quickly, kick it back over to Allison. So I don't know. I don't see any other questions on here. If you guys are interested in some of this information, or specifically some of the training that I do, you can check out our website. The link's in the description, but it's www.slcsquared. That's squared is spelled out .com.
Can you give Andy a shout out? He says the Springfield Hellcat is great. That's my personal choice. And say hey to Andy.
Oh, hi Andy, and the Springfield Hellcat. Springfield makes good firearms too, and that's the one thing I'll say. Like, firearms are such a personal thing for people. It really boils down to what you do. Yes, Allie and I have done some shooting way back when we first met. Probably get her going on that more, but it's really, you know,
We have coyotes.
Yeah. The thing is shoot, like, a firearm's just like any tool. You need to use the appropriate tool for the job. You need to know how to use the tool and be good at it, and you can most certainly manipulate the tool to better fit you. That being said, something to keep in mind, if the only tool I have in my toolbox is a hammer, then everything in the world begins to look like a nail. So just something to consider, guys. So at any rate, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for giving me your time. And my wife says I'm a tool. That's awesome. Old man funky. That's great. So, yeah, I think Allie might say the same thing about me sometimes, at least maybe when I'm not around. Who knows? But all of you be safe out there. I appreciate everybody supporting Allison and what she does. I think she's a pretty smart lady, but I might be biased in that regard. Raven asked me, do you conceal carry at home? Yeah. So, but it's either on me or it's secured and put away. And so that's the way I look at that. So if I have to go digging through a safe because something's getting ready to kick off, well, to me that doesn't seem like a quick response. But again, there's also certain things here within the state of Washington that are specific with regard to having firearms in the home, because again, you're responsible, you're liable for those. Yeah, I'll give you a quick example actually before I go. I was coming out to Seattle to visit Allie. This was when we were first dating, and I had just left a law enforcement conference. And at that conference, we were also doing stuff on the range. So I had 2 gun cases with me because I had several guns. We were using them on the range at that conference. And as I was making my way to the light rail, I was in between the airport and the light rail, and some homeless Pete kind of guy. I could tell he walked past me, and then I could tell he was following me. I looked back a couple times, and he was following me. He started closing the distance, and then he started getting really agitated and saying a whole bunch of stuff that I won't repeat over the air. But ultimately, it came to a point where I was afraid that he was going to maybe accost me. and, assault me. And the problem is ordinarily, if I didn't have those firearms with me, I would have probably just dropped my bags and ran, because my bags are not worth my life, is the way I look at it. And I know definitely I would have outran the guy. Again, it's a situation dependent decision. If he's danger close to me and he carries a weapon, well, I'm not going to run just so I could die tired either. So those are based on your training and decision making that you have. The unfortunate thing is because I was carrying several weapons, they were locked in secured cases, so it's not like I could get to them quickly. I personally had a responsibility, or I felt to myself, that I was not going to leave those weapon systems, because that's the last thing I need is some guy to steal my weapons, and now they're out on the street. And that, to me, like, that sense of responsibility is, what if one of those weapons gets used in a violent crime? So I stood my ground. And I was prepared to articulate whatever I was going to have to do. And ultimately, the Port of Seattle police arrived, and we were able to handle the situation. And thankfully, nobody was hurt or anything like that. But it's just that quickly situation can take place. And, there's nothing lost by thinking things through, like mentally preparing yourself, like, hey, I'm going to a gas station. And as I pump up at the fuel pump, I'm going to go inside, decide to get a soda or a drink, and just taking a second, we call it SILS, stop, look, listen, smell, and pay attention to, what's the behavior, what's the atmosphere of this specific geographical location, of this habitual area, this two-way street. Does the behavior match what my expectations would be for this given time of day and the type of scenario situation I'm in? And so, those are things that you have to look at and pay attention to. But if I'm it's not about being hyper vigilant, but if I think to myself, well, if I walk in that store and there's an armed robbery in progress, what would I do? Would I get to cover? Would I leave the store? Would I pull my firearm if I have my firearm? Like, what am I going to do? And just going through that mental, we call it train the brain. Pro athletes do it. They visualize, or form a visualization. That's what we talk about with train the brain. And so nothing's lost by doing that. So that's not me being hyper vigilant, because if I walk in the store and there's nobody, it's not going on, okay, well, I just go about my business. Or say I walk in there and I had mentally prepared myself, if there was one person in there with a firearm robbing the store, well, now there's two. Well, at least I had a baseline. At least I had a start, versus hitting a file folder where I don't have a thought process for that. Then it becomes a non-standard observation for me, and the potential is for you to go into denial there, and denial can really slow you down when it comes to decision making. So with that being said, I'll be around. Yep. I'll be around if you need anything. Thanks, Raven, for the super chat, and thanks for Just Wrench It. I've been watching some of your stuff there, Just Wrench It, so I like your channel, man. It's pretty cool. So at any rate, thank you all, and have a good rest of your Sunday.
All right. Well, I'm just going to wrap it up, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we're going to do more Sundays. Lynn does kind of have an erratic schedule, far more than I do. So that's kind of why I stopped doing Airstream renovation videos, because I don't know anything about renovating an Airstream. And so who wants to listen to me talk about that? Nobody. But I do know a lot about the media, which is probably why you're here. Anyway, so let's give it up for Lynn. Internet applause, right? Isn't this what they do in the theaters?
I think
in the libraries.
No, that's at the poetry reading.
Poetry reading. Clap for Lynn. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for Patreon. Thanks for PayPal, and just thanks for your time and liking and commenting and whatnot. I hope, like I said, that we're gonna get some more content going. My goal has been to at least get 2 up a week, even if maybe that's 1 recorded video and 1 live stream, but I would like to do more. You guys know probably that I'm a new mom, and I do all this by myself, researching and whatnot. So it actually does help when people suggest story ideas, because that gives me something to look up. And that's one of the perks of being one of my patrons, because we do a lot more talking over there because there's fewer people, and it's easier for me to get back to everybody. So that's something that we talk about over there, is just like, what do you guys want me to cover? What's trending in the news? I'm always interested in hearing what you all want to hear me talk about. Again, the focus of my channel is really doing media analysis right now. And I think eventually, once I get this going a little bit more and I can be more independent on it, I'd like to actually start doing the kind of journalism that I used to do, which was, sort of a higher level than I think what I'm doing right now. I mean, admittedly, right now I'm doing a lot of sort of kind of holding the media accountable to some of the problems that I see, which has created a lot of distrust, to kind of regain a little bit of that trust and to sort of hopefully steer, journalists in a direction to kind of say, all right, guys, like, how can we do better and work more, for the people. I've actually questioned for you all. I have 2 shirt ideas for merch. One is Frenemy of the People. What do you think about that? Let's vote. Frenemy of the People or hot yoga instructor, because I get that at least once a video. Somebody writes that, and I've already said multiple times I'm not a yoga instructor, but I never have discounted the fact that I'm hot. So you heard it here first. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you again next Sunday if we can get this thing going again. Again, thanks for the super chats. And I am going to close out here. I missed the Airstream. Okay, so actually, before I go, secret for you all who are tuning in right now, we are going to have another channel launching soon for the Airstream renovation. And I have been stealthily uploading videos to that channel, which you will not be able to find right now, I don't think, just so that it'll be ready to go. One of the cool things that's going to be on the channel, besides the fact that the Airstream renovation is going to be on there, we're going to talk about like our off-gridish move and everything on that channel, but I will have a video of our birth. Not the gross parts, but so you can get a kind of an inside look on what it was like to give birth during COVID, because I think that was really interesting, and, first-time parents and everything. So that's going to be on the new channel, and I'll have more to come on that. But I decided to split them because it just seems like it has made sense for YouTube's algorithm to just try to keep it simplified and streamlined topically, because then it doesn't confuse YouTube, like, what does this person do and who is her audience? And so the Airstream stuff will be on another channel. Also, because if eventually I somehow get booted from YouTube, I have another channel. So just trying to diversify that portfolio. And Alex Wallace says, merch, yes. Yeah, it's all about the merch, right? Frenemy of the People, though, appears to be the winner right now. Okay. Well, that was my first idea. Main issue is getting people to focus on supporting evidence-based reporting away from the blame reporting. Yeah. I'm going to talk about this in another video at some point, but I do think that the journalists who are in the business right now, who are still really trying to do a good job and are succeeding at that, I don't think there is a lot of attention paid to the fact that they are working under some incredibly problematic circumstances, not the least of which is that they have like no time to do their job. They start, at 9:30, 10 in the morning with editorial meetings, and they have to have something ready to go in a few hours. And if you think about the amount of time, like, especially if you're in television, you're driving to your story, you have to do the interviews, and you have to edit it, writing, voicing, all that stuff. And one of the reasons why I got out of the business was because I didn't want to do any harm with my reporting. And I felt like more and more with the complicated topics that I was covering, it was very hard, not just to encapsulate the topic in like 90 seconds or less, which is what, a lot of times you're required to do, but to just understand the topic at all in, 4 hours that you have to go out and investigate it. So we'll talk more about that another time, because there are a lot of journalists out there who's really still doing a good job, but they're kind of strapped to, just the way things are done now. And then also the fact that if you're working for a cable or network news station, you have different parameters versus a local news station, but the local news stations regurgitate a lot of what their network says. So you may think, oh, well, my local news station had this biased national report. Well, that may be because they just copy and paste the network reporting into their prompter for the local station. And the producers nowadays too they're the workhorses of the newsroom, and they barely have time to go to the bathroom during the day. So there are a lot of issues that the business is facing that's not like necessarily these, Dr. Evil plots that people think. Not that there isn't stuff like that out there. But, I would say some of the stuff is probably more insidious, less obvious, but that doesn't mean it's not problematic. So, all right, Allie, you need to get the speck off of your left lens. How about I just take the glasses off? Oh God, it's like Clark Kent. So now everybody gets to see this. How I'm gonna end it though. Thanks, guys. I hope you have a great Sunday. I will see you around next time. Bye.